to Words with Dr. Whitaker. Hi, I'm so excited to be with you today. And also, I have two guests. Our first guest is the City Schools of Decatur Board of Education student representative, and that is Sophie DeElena. Also, we have our apprentice, Miss Nia Batra. I am so excited to have both of you on the podcast today, and it's a little different format, but I think this format is most appropriate because both of you are students. So, please, we have a senior who is Miss Sophie D. Elena. She made history when she was elected by her peers at Decatur High School to serve as our first student representative at the Board of Education. According to the School Board Association for Georgia, which is otherwise known as GSBA, Sophie is also the first Board of Education student representative in Georgia. So, yes, there are other school systems that have advisories and things of that nature, but Sophie was actually elected by her peers, which is a little different. Also, we have on the podcast today a junior, Miss Nia Batra, who also made history when she was elected to be the apprentice. So, please welcome both Sophie and Nia to the podcast. Before we get started, I just want to give a little bit of a background around why this is so important. In the City Schools of Decatur, the Board of Education believes that we should amplify student voice. And when we amplify student voice, we're actually addressing one of our strategic accelerators in the board strategic plan, which is called All in Decatur. So I'm going to start with really number two, which is building a sustaining and engaging, also inclusive culture here in the City Schools of Decatur. One of the best ways to build that culture is to focus on students. And that means to amplify their voice. So the Board of Education really wanted to be a little creative, be innovative in the way in which we amplify student voice. So one of those ways, obviously, is to have a student on the board, on the dais, in the conversations, in the trainings, in the retreats, and both of our apprentice as well as our board representative from a student perspective, they've been in all of that this year. But our strategic plan, All in Decatur, has four strategic accelerators. And every time we have been on a podcast, I've spoken about all of them. So, number one, student success in all areas. Number two, building and sustaining that engaging and inclusive culture. But in order to do that, we must have staff that is high quality, that we are able to recruit and retain, so that ultimately, when we think about the foundation of our school system, our organization is effective and excellent. So, those are our four strategic accelerators. We're going to focus a little more today in building and sustaining an engaging and inclusive culture through the role of being a Board of Education student representative. So now let's go ahead and get started. You are in very unique roles as student representatives on the board because the majority of the podcasts in the past have focused on student success in all areas. You are the students that we want to see successful, but you wanted to run for that seat for a reason. So, what made you run for the student rep and the apprentice seat on the board? So, first Sophie and then Nia.
I think that I initially wanted to run because I saw that there was a little bit of a disconnect between the Board of Education and the students that the Board of Education serves.
Mhm.
And I thought that being a Board of Education student representative would be a great way to kind of bridge that gap that I saw. And I just also wanted to represent the students that surrounded me. So yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Nia, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I know that some of the board members haven't even been in school in like 20 or 30 years.
Are
And I
you
just
calling
think
us
it's really
old?
important to like
Nia,
bring in
Nia, did you hear what I said? I said,
no,
are you calling us old?
no. No. Um Yeah, so I just like Sophia says, we want to bridge that gap a little bit because
Hmm.
when you're talking about policy at the dais, you're not necessarily thinking about every single facet of how it might land for a student. And
Hmm.
even across the state, in my own personal capacity, doing a lot of advocacy work, I've seen boards not really resonate with their communities. And I love
Hmm.
Decatur so much as a city, and I think that we really put forward students and their perspectives. Um, so it just felt natural to run.
Awesome. Awesome. So, Sophie, thinking back to June of 2024 at the Georgia School Board Association conference in Savannah, all the way till now, it's almost been a year. Please tell me some of the things that you've learned along the way.
I've learned so much. It's kind of crazy. I've learned a lot about policy and how it's made and the
Mhm.
process that it goes through to, reach the actual school itself.
Mhm.
Um, I've learned a lot about the budget and how that works. I've learned a lot about governance and how to be an elected official, which is just, those are some things that I just didn't really have any idea of before
Mhm.
I was in this position. Um, and just overall, like the responsibilities that, you have as a Board of Education member.
Mhm. Awesome. I want to ask a bit of a follow up on that. So it's been about a year. How have your interactions, if you will, with the members of the board influenced your thoughts about public service in the future?
Well, I definitely, before coming into this role, I wasn't really thinking about the future much, but I think that this role has opened up a lot of opportunities for me. Um,
Hmm.
Nia and I have gone down to the Capitol a couple times this year, and so I've been able to talk to um, senators and really get involved in just governance and um, legislation and all that kind of stuff because it all ties into each other. And so
Hmm.
having exposure to that definitely makes me think about what I can do in my future
Hmm.
that I just didn't think about before.
Okay. So, Nia, you've been watching and learning. So, it was very intentional for us to have you shadow, if you will, in the apprentice role over the past year. So, tell me, what for you have you learned over this year?
Yeah, I guess the first thing I would say is the budget. I know in like the first meeting, or even in meetings I went to before I was on the board, my eyes would just kind of glaze over when they were reading out all the numbers. But now that I talked to Dr. Broom, who's our CFO, and she helps like sift through those numbers. And now when we're having like intense conversations about like the military or the FY26 budget, I feel like I can, I can really like summarize them and even in a way I could explain to my peers. So I'm really grateful for that because I don't like economics at all. And then I've also learned that there's just like so much more to governance than it really seems. Like it really is an all-encompassing job. Um, but mostly it's been cool to go into schools and talk to students directly about
Mhm.
how they feel. And it's been a really unique opportunity that I've learned from a lot.
Awesome, awesome. So, Sophie, what would you say was your most memorable experience this year?
kind of bouncing off of what Nia just said, going and visiting schools, especially the elementary schools, and talking to the students there has been really memorable for me. Um, and I think it's also very important just because those are the students that don't necessarily get taken seriously because they are younger. And so, you know, as a Board of Education student member, I do represent not just the high school, but all of the schools in the district. And so, speaking to those students and listening to their voice um, has been really memorable for me.
Okay. Okay. So, Sophie, what advice do you have for Nia or even other future student representatives? I know we've just ended a process, an election process at the high school, but what advice, Sophie, do you have for Nia and other future board reps?
Um, well, Nia, I don't want you to get discouraged. It is definitely a challenging role. But for other future student members, I would say don't get overwhelmed with the amount of information that you'll be given. It's okay not to understand and to just listen. You
Mhm,
won't understand probably for a while, and that's completely fine and normal. You're just
mhm,
learning, and that's okay.
mhm, mhm. Okay, so Sophie, just out of curiosity, where are you going next year?
I'm going to Georgia Tech.
Oh, awesome, awesome. Very excited, very proud of you, and excited for your future. Nia, as the incoming Board of Education student representative, how will you build on the path that Sophie has forged?
I mean, I feel so much luckier than Sophie because I feel like I can hit the ground running next year without having to
Mhm,
relearn a lot of things.
mhm,
So together we've set up a really excellent framework that we're going to talk through a little bit more later, I think. Just because we've gone to all of these schools and have figured out kind of what our priorities for to advocate for on the behalf of students. So things
mhm,
like sustainability and frameworks for that in our schools are really important to
mhm.
me. So hopefully I will carry on that torch. And then, um, yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the handbook. So, you all, not many people know that this is an actual class, correct?
Yes.
How often are you in class as a student board rep?
We are in class 3 times a week.
Okay.
It's a class period, so
Hmm.
on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, and it's an internship-based class. So sometimes we'll stay in the classroom and work on projects, and other times we will leave the classroom um, to go to different schools or talk to different people. Depends.
So, what type of projects have you been working on?
So during first semester this year, we worked on a project where we wrote a handbook, and we've also done projects where we could just compile all of the stuff that we've learned by interviewing students.
Hmm.
That's a separate thing we did, things like that.
So, what are some of the features of the handbook, out of curiosity?
So the handbook is essentially like a guide for incoming apprentices. And so they can use that to kind of understand and have like a jump start about how things work.
Hmm.
Um, it includes stuff about how to be a board member or an elected official, the roles and responsibilities. Um, as a part of a governance team, it talks about policy and how policy is made. We also talk about budget and board etiquette. So all sorts of things in that.
All right, Nia, you want to add anything more about the handbook or any of the other projects?
Yeah, so for the handbook, we hope that it's like an evergreen resource for all of our successors, so then they can also add to it as
Mhm.
they learn more things too. I bet we could already add a lot to it since we finished ours. So that's really cool. And then another one of our projects was Amplifying Student Voice. So that was, it started with the research phase where we went to every single elementary, middle school, and high school in the district, and then talked to students and then summarized some of the things that they said to us that were important into a presentation for the board.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and oh, sorry.
Go on, Sophie.
Also, during first semester, we were kind of, because it's a new role, we were kind of helping Miss Lynch create the curriculum because that wasn't really totally figured out yet. So we were working together to create, a way for the class to have structure, creating projects, creating rubrics, things like that.
So you all were literally building the plane and flying it at the same time.
Yeah.
Yes, that is what we have done. It was a great idea that we had to get off the ground, but now we need to keep it on above the ground. So awesome. So when you think about presenting, so what are some of the ways that this work has been highlighted, or would you even in future want to highlight? We've had a couple of opportunities I'm thinking of, but I'm just curious, how would you amplify this role in this process even further?
Like, what would you?
So talk about where have you presented, or have you presented any place, or are you going to present any place, or where would you in the future want to present for each one of you?
Yeah, so after visiting all the schools and compiling all things that they told us and all the recommendations they had, we put a little project together, and then we presented in front of the board at the last April board meeting. I don't know exactly when it was, but we presented all the things that we heard and kind of summarized the wants and needs of our community. And that's where we were able to express what we think needs to change.
We were also invited to COSVA, which is the one of the national big school board conferences, where we presented how our board uses the student representative to a bunch of other states, and hopefully some of those districts will be able to implement it in theirs.
Yeah. We've also, to add on to that, we'll be presenting at the Georgia School Board Association. So there has been a lot of talk about what we have done in this innovation so that other school boards and other school districts could possibly replicate or do something similar to amplify student voice, which is necessary to bring your voices to the table. So it sounds like the handbook has been helpful, and it will be a great roadmap for the future. I want to pause actually and thank two staff members. One you've mentioned, but the first would be Miss Courtney Burnett. So Miss Burnett has worked tirelessly with the staff of DHS in identifying you all in the election process and outlining and overseeing that process with the staff at DHS. And then the second person is the chief of staff, who is Mrs. Amanda Lynch. It sounds like she's been a great mentor and teacher for you all this year. I know I will see you often come into the office, and I wave when you're meeting with her. But she really has brought a lot of her heart, her teaching skills and abilities, and she just shows a lot of enthusiasm for what you do each and every day as student reps. So I just want to thank both of them publicly, and how they have poured into the two of you, because I've watched it. So that's awesome.
Yes, they've been wonderful.
Yeah. Miss Lynch definitely has been holding our hand through this year.
She has. To be honest, you have helped always remembering and keeping us grounded on the needs of students, which is why we have this as a innovation in our district. So it gets back to our hearts, as originally both Miss Lynch and myself, we were teachers. So we love it. We love it. But before we close, is there anything else about your experience that you would want to share um, with with us, with the listeners of this podcast. Anything that has happened, any insights, things you're looking forward to, anything of that nature.
I would say one of my favorite parts of any board meeting is when a student gets up to speak during public comment. And
Mm,
so I would say I hope that our position on the board inspires other students in our community to continue talking to the board and advocating for the issues they care about.
yes. I love when students are sharing their lived experience. That is really vital so that everyone, whether it's the board, the public, me, staff, we all know what the needs are. So that's key.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I've realized after being in this position for almost a year now is that Board of Educations are a very unique type of governance team,
Mm,
because you really have to work together and really try to see, like being on a board of education is like being like on a team with like teammates,
mhm,
and you all have the same goals and visions, and you all have this, like, students are the priority.
mhm.
And so it's been really amazing to see, you know, the the board members working together and asking questions and trying to figure out what the best move is. And so that's been really great to see.
All right. Well, both Nia and Sophie, thank you so much for being on Words with Dr. Whitaker. We have learned a lot today, and we will continue to learn from our students on the board. Sophie, I thank you so much for all that you have done as being that pioneer across this first year of implementation. And Nia, I know you are going to continue to amplify the student voice as you come. And in May, you're actually going to be sworn in. So, really excited about that and engaging in that training this summer at GSBA and fulfilling the role of the student member, board member representative. So, thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Nia, for sharing your perspectives today, because you are the first. And that's very, very, very exciting. And thank you for being the pioneers in that role. And then finally, thank you for being all in for the city schools of Decatur. So, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in with Words with Dr. Whitaker, and have a great remainder of the school year.